speech in America right now, I think you're not exactly paying attention, because you understand the government fed us a whole bunch of bad information, especially during the pandemic. And then the government defended giving the bad information. At the same time, there were government agencies that were saying, hey, we can't let Americans just engage in free speech. Like, we want to tell social media to shut down that message, including messages like the New York Post's famous story on the laptop from hell. They wanted the power to shut that down. And the Biden administration, they want the power to shut down the free speech of not just Donald Trump, but you and me as well on social media. So I invited Carl Szabo on, who's vice president of Net Choice, a trade association of businesses focused on free speech and enterprise online. Carl, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It seems the Biden administration is not being shy about asking for the power to control the speech of Americans on social media at all. They're not even trying to they're not even trying to camouflage it much. They're asking the courts, let us have control of what people say. Am I overstating that?
No, not at all. Much to my chagrin. I mean, let's remember, it was about a year ago we had that completely brazen attempt by the Biden administration to kind of seize control of speech online. Many of us may not remember the so-called Disinformation Governance Board, but we certainly remember the person that they chose to lead it. It was a Mary Poppins-esque character who was singing about how disinformation is going to destroy us all. And, I mean, you can't get much more Orwellian than calling it the Disinformation Governance Board. So we just had court hearings today, actually, in the Missouri v. Biden case, which is centered around exactly what you brought up, Lars, which is this whole, how much was the government controlling free speech? How much was the government leaning on or compelling and coercing social media platforms to remove and censor speech? And was that a violation of the First Amendment? So we had a decision about a week or two, back on July 4th, where the judge in that case said absolute violation of the First Amendment. But the Biden administration is not letting something like the First Amendment or the U.S. Constitution stop it. We actually saw Congress to consider introduction of a new bill that would create another government agency. This one's called the Digital Consumer Protection Commission from Senator Elizabeth Warren. So you know that can't be good for free speech online or for Americans. So we're seeing attacks on free speech from the government at the executive branch level, in Congress, and everywhere else. And it really is something that should scare us all as Americans.
I guess I'm just surprised by the brazen nature of this. They're not trying to camouflage it at all. And I'm with you. That old, the Mary Poppins lady who was going to head up what we called the Ministry of Truth, that somehow the government was going to tell us what was true and what wasn't, including, I suppose, things like, hey, if you take the vaccine, you can't catch COVID, something that even Joe Biden has said. And you say, that's not true. Well, yeah, they're allowed to speak untruths. You commoners are not. Seems to be the messaging. And I would think that Americans would really reject that notion wholesale, whether they're conservative or liberal, say you can't have the government define what truth is and then forbid anybody else to say anything to the contrary.
Yeah, I mean, look, our founding fathers knew this. They created the First Amendment to protect us from this. And you can see the complete turn on services like Twitter, or now it's called X, once Elon Musk took over and said, you know what, we are not going to do your bidding anymore. In fact, we are going to expose to the American people what was done to us by the Biden administration to censor this speech. And that was the famous Twitter files from people like Matt Taibbi who testified about it. And then we recently, within the past week or two, got even more data. So the U.S. House of Representatives Judiciary Committee under Jim Jordan has just been doing this constant drip feed of documents. So we got this latest round of files about how the Biden administration was leaning on and coercing Facebook to remove content. And Facebook said, no, we don't want to do that. We think this violates free speech. This violates all of our principles. And it turns out one of the Facebook files revealed that Facebook was legitimately worried that the Biden administration would shut off Facebook's ability to do digital ads in Europe, costing Facebook $1 billion a year. So, and we know Biden has had a history of these types of demands because he did so with Ukraine's firing of a prosecutor in exchange for the release of American funds. We talked about that at the Committee on Foreign Relations.
He bragged about it and said, yeah, I'm a tough guy. I told him, Bill, you either fire, the prosecutor or I'm going to have $1 billion held up. And if you don't believe me, call Barack Obama. We've run the soundbite 100 times, but where did we get to the point in America where you have a judge that orders X, Twitter, formerly Twitter, say you will give up Donald Trump's Twitter account and you will not notify Donald Trump that you're giving up his information, and a judge is ordering you to do that, and if you don't do it, I'm going to hit you with a $350,000 fine. This doesn't sound like anything that would ever come from any kind of judge who actually has read the Constitution.
The thing with warrants, so the warrant basically means the government can come in and go through your personal assets. They can kick in the door. It's famously seen in what's called the Fourth Amendment. And our founding fathers knew that the government would just go through all of our stuff if we didn't have a limit, if we didn't have a restriction on that ability. And that's called the warrant. Now, warrants are issued all the time for law enforcement to go and do their jobs. You can watch the crime TV show and a warrant is issued and the police officers can then enter the home. But it's a pretty high bar. And you have to show that there was a crime, the likelihood of a crime, and that evidence of the crime is likely to be found in there. And one of the problems with this latest prosecution of President Trump is a lot of legal experts are asking, what's the crime? Free speech is not a crime. Talking about elections is not a crime. If it were, Stacey Abrams would be in prison alongside Hillary Clinton, but it's not. So that's free speech. So that's the first problem. The second is what the judge ordered. They ordered what's called a gag order on Twitter. So Twitter, even though they were told you have to hand over these documents, they were also simultaneously told you are forbidden from telling President Trump about this warrant, about the fact that you are required to hand over information on a Twitter account. Now, the gag orders are used by courts to prevent one of two things. Either one, the government's going to continue to kind of listen in on the phone calls, and you want to hear the mafia boss talk about the dirty deeds.
Right.
Well,
or
that's not happening. Twitter.
Yeah,
but Trump hasn't used Twitter in years, since January 6th. So that doesn't make sense. The second time that you would use it is if you're worried about document destruction. But the documents are held by Twitter on multiple servers, and backups are available. So it's not as though President Trump or former President Trump can go in and destroy these documents. So the gag order itself doesn't make sense because the basis for a gag order doesn't make sense. The only reason you would do it is to prevent Twitter from making this information publicly available and or to prevent President Trump from making this information available to the public. And if that's the purpose, that's a restriction on free speech, because if our Department of Justice is going through the files and documents of a political opponent, I think that's something we all should know about.
Well, and here's the thing. All they would ever prevent Trump from doing, if he knew the government was going through his Twitter file, if Twitter, if X notified him, he'd be able to go out and make a case to the public. Hey, they're searching stuff that they have no business to search, and he could make that argument. All they were doing is preventing Donald Trump from talking about what the government was doing. As you said, if there's a sealed warrant because they're investigating a terrorist who's going to set off a bomb somewhere and they don't want him to run or set the bomb off early, I completely understand a sealed warrant. But sealing the mouth of a political opponent of Joe Biden, that's just absolutely out of line. That is Carl Szabo. He's vice president of NetChoice, a trade association of businesses who, unlike Joe Biden, is focused on free speech and enterprise online. I'll get to your phone calls and emails, including a naysayer, coming up in a moment. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show.